Imagine being told you have 30 days to surrender everything you've worked for, or a giant who could tear you in half with his bare hands will come and destroy you. That was the position humanity was in. In the gleaming galactic council chamber, lit by 3 different suns, we looked like children at a table of giants. And if you think I'm exaggerating, just hit that subscribe button, because you need to hear how this went down. Ambassador Sarah Chen stood alone at the center of it all, representing all of Earth. She looked tiny, surrounded by 200 alien species, towering warriors, shimmering energy beings, and ancient creatures in massive shells. The one making the threats was Commander Thrak of the Vorak Empire. Picture a 9-foot-tall monster covered in battle scars, with claws that could shred steel. His voice boomed across the chamber, a place supposedly for civilized debate. The ancient speaker of the council, a floating energy being named Valdris, who had seen empires rise and fall for 10,000 years, simply announced, "The council recognizes Commander Thrak." And just like that, the bullying began. "Honored Council!" Thrak roared, though there was nothing honorable about it. "The humans have filed paperwork for mining rights in 17 systems. These are our systems." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. You see, humanity was the new kid on the block, only 50 years in the Galactic Council. A blink of an eye for most of these species. Thrak continued, playing to the crowd. "The Vorak Empire has bled for those systems for 800 years. We fought pirates and raiders to keep them safe," he declared. "And now these newcomers think a piece of paper gives them the right to take what is ours by blood and honor?" The crowd loved it. You could hear the clicking and buzzing of other species agreeing with him. It was a classic case of the big guy picking on the little guy. Ambassador Chen finally stepped forward. "May I respond?" she asked, her voice calm but firm. The speaker, Valdris, seemed amused. "The council recognizes the human." Sarah Chen had been Earth's ambassador for 12 long years. She'd endured endless meetings where aliens treated us like toddlers. She'd smiled through lectures on how the real galaxy worked from species who hadn't seen a real fight in centuries. But today was different. "The 17 systems in question," she said, her voice cutting through the noise, "were unclaimed territory under galactic law. Earth followed every single rule. We filed the claims, we did the surveys, we registered our findings, we did everything by the book." Commander Thrak's face, if you can call it that, twisted in rage. "Laws? You talk of laws when we have spilled blood? Our honor claims are centuries old. What do you humans know of honor?" And there it was, the word they always used against us, honor. The Vorak were warriors. To them, strength was everything, and because we hadn't fought a major galactic war, they saw us as weak. "We know enough about honor," Sarah shot back, "to follow the laws we all agreed to. If the Vorak wanted those systems, they should have filed their own paperwork a few hundred years ago." The chamber exploded. Aliens were shouting. The entire Vorak delegation was on its feet, claws out. Thrak's voice cut through the chaos. "Paperwork! Your flimsy human paper means nothing against Vorak honor." He then laid down the ultimatum. "The humans will withdraw all claims within 30 standard days. You will pay us for this insult, and you will learn that junior species do not challenge their betters." Total silence. You just don't do that in the Galactic Council. Disputes are handled by committees over decades, not by open threats. Sarah's heart was pounding, but you couldn't hear it in her voice. "Earth rejects this ultimatum," she said clearly. "We will not abandon our legal rights because you threaten us." Thrak's claws screeched against his metal chair. "Then you will earn your place." Even the ancient speaker Valdris seemed worried. "Commander, the council advises against military action." But Thrak wasn't listening. He was staring directly at Sarah. "30 days, human. Surrender and pay, or face the consequences." Sarah didn't even blink. All around her, the other council members looked away, uncomfortable. Nobody wanted a war, but nobody was stepping in to help us either. After the session, everyone tried to tell Sarah to just give in. The ancient speaker Valdris floated down. Perhaps a compromise. The Vorak are very passionate. An old rock-like creature, Elder Crix, grumbled, "The humans show courage, but not wisdom. The Vorak fleets are mighty." They all saw us as fools, marching toward our own doom. That night, Sarah sent a coded message to Earth. It said the Vorak had taken the bait and to proceed with the real plan. The 30 days passed in a flash. A massive Vorak battle fleet, hundreds of warships strong, appeared in orbit over the main human colony and the disputed systems. They broadcast a single message: "Your time is up." But instead of a surrender, they received a system-wide broadcast from Ambassador Chen. She was standing not in an embassy, but in front of a recently excavated ancient stone temple on one of the very worlds the Vorak claimed. "Commander Thrak," she began, her voice broadcast to the Vorak fleet and the entire Galactic Council. "You spoke of honor, so let's talk about honor." She gestured to the temple behind her. "Our survey teams didn't just find minerals, they found this, a temple to the Vorj, the ancient ancestors of the Vorak." A shockwave of surprise went through the Vorak fleet. "According to your own oldest laws, the honor of the first find, any sacred ancestral site, if discovered by another species acting in good faith, grants that species guardianship and title to the entire system it resides in." This was the big reveal. Our paperwork wasn't just a mining claim, it was an honor claim filed under ancient Vorak law, a law so old the modern, arrogant Vorak had completely forgotten it even existed. We hadn't just followed galactic law, we had followed their law. "We have filed our findings not just with the Council," Sarah said, "but with the priests of Vor on your own homeworld. They have confirmed our claim is valid under your most sacred traditions. The Vorak were trapped. To attack us now would be to violate their own deepest sense of honor, proving to the entire galaxy that their pride was more important than their history." On the bridge of his flagship, Commander Thrak was speechless. The war leader of the entire Vorak Empire appeared on his screen, his face grim. "The claim is righteous," the old warrior rasped. "Stand down, Commander. We will honor our ancestors." And just like that, the mighty Vorak fleet turned around and left. We kept all 17 systems, and we didn't have to fire a single shot. The moral of the story? True honor isn't about being the strongest. It's about having the wisdom to respect laws, history, and most of all, never ever underestimating the underdog. Imagine getting a call that your kid's hospital was just vaporized by an alien fleet. A tragic mistake, they said. What would you do? What would humanity do? Stick around because you're about to find out. The call came through to Governor Martinez, a kind old man with worry lines etched deep into his face. On the screen was Commander Thrakosh of the mighty Vorhak Empire. "Human," he boomed, "your species has disrespected our claims. We are here to teach you a lesson." Martinez pleaded, "Commander, this is a peaceful colony. We have families, children. Surely we can talk this out." Thrakosh's voice was cold as space. "The time for talk is over. Your leaders chose pride over sense. Now you pay the price. Evacuate your civilians. Our targeted strikes on military and industrial sites will begin in 1 hour." On the colony of New Geneva, that hour was pure chaos. Families scrambled into vehicles, fleeing into the countryside, while the handful of soldiers on the planet tried broadcasting surrender signals, hoping to save what they could. These colonists had only ever seen war in old movies. Then, the Vorhak fleet began its demonstration. Laser-sharp plasma beams rained down from the sky. The tiny military base was gone in a flash. The orbital station vanished. Factories were turned into glowing holes in the ground. The attacks were brutally efficient, a terrifying display of power by warriors with centuries of experience. They could level a building without so much as cracking the window of the one next to it. This was supposed to be a show of force, not a slaughter. But even the most advanced technology can fail. On Thrakash's flagship, a tiny computer glitch occurred, a 1 in a million error. A plasma beam aimed at a communications tower drifted just 3 degrees. It slammed directly into the New Geneva Children's Hospital. In that single horrific moment, 847 children died. They were in the playroom, sleeping in their beds, getting treated for scraped knees and the flu. The entire building, and everyone in it, was turned to dust in less than a second. Commander Thrakash stared at his screen, his blood running cold. The targeting officer ran the diagnostics again and again, his hands trembling. "Commander," he stammered, "Sir, we hit a civilian target, a hospital, for their young." A weight like a dying star settled in Thrakash's chest. The Vorhak were warriors, not monsters. Their ancient code of honor held one rule as sacred above all others: you do not harm the young. "Cease fire," Thrakash roared. "All ships cease fire now." He opened a frantic channel to the governor. "Governor Martinez, there's been a terrible, terrible accident. One of our weapons misfired. We struck a medical facility." Governor Martinez's face reappeared, his face slick with tears, his expression utterly broken. "The children's hospital," he choked out. "You hit the children's hospital." Thrakash had never known shame like this. "Governor, I swear to you, it was not our intent. Our targeting system failed. We will offer immediate aid, full reparations, anything." But Martinez had already cut the feed. The news spread like a shockwave. Images of the smoldering crater where a hospital used to be were on every screen in human space, followed by an endless scroll of names and photos of the children who were lost. The galaxy watched as an entire species went into mourning. Ambassador Chen was in her office when she got the list. She just sat there for a long time, staring at the 847 names, 847 lives cut short. Then she picked up her phone and started making calls. She spoke to leaders on Earth, to military commanders, to contacts hidden deep within the system. The conversations were short, her voice was quiet, but her message was clear. The children are gone. Someone is going to pay. The Galactic Council demanded an emergency meeting. The Vorhak apologized profusely and offered a fortune in reparations. Commander Thrakash himself took full responsibility. By all galactic laws, that should have been the end of it. An accident was an accident. But then humanity went silent. For 3 straight days, not a single human official said a word. Embassies shut down. All communication ceased. The silence was unnerving. It was absolute and terrifying. On the 4th day, Ambassador Chen walked into the council chamber. She looked small, frail, her face pale with grief. The whole room held its breath as she approached the podium. "The government of Earth accepts the Vorhak Empire's apology," she said, her voice a fragile whisper. "We acknowledge the deaths were unintentional." You could feel the relief wash over the alien delegates. The crisis was over. But Chen wasn't finished. "Earth hereby withdraws all claims in the disputed territories. We will sign whatever peace treaty you desire." The council speaker was beaming. "A wise decision, Ambassador. Your species shows great maturity." Chen gave a slow, sad nod. "We are just a young species after all. We have much to learn." She turned to leave, then paused as if she just remembered something. "There is one small request. We would like to build a memorial for the children, something simple, to help our people grieve. We ask for 30 days to complete it before we sign the final treaty." The request seemed so reasonable, so touching. "Of course," the speaker said instantly. "Take all the time you need." Chen bowed her head and walked out. The aliens all started chattering about how well the humans had handled the crisis, but none of them noticed that Ambassador Chen never said what the memorial would be made of. And none of them knew that for the last 72 hours, every factory, shipyard, and soldier in human space had been preparing for war. For 50 years, humanity had played the part of a peaceful, junior member of the galactic community. Our massive military shipyards were turned into shopping malls and condo developments. Our weapons factories started making luxury cars. The galaxy saw us as a species that had finally grown up. They were wrong. Deep beneath a mountain on Earth, Admiral Marcus Rodriguez watched his screens light up. He was an old soldier with scars on his hands and ice in his veins. He remembered what humanity was like before the peace treaties, back when we had to fight for every inch of space. "Report," he said, his voice echoing in the command center. A young colonel named Sarah Kim answered, "All activation codes have been sent, sir. Lockheed Martin is retooling. Boeing has called every retired engineer back to work. The Russians have unsealed their old weapons vaults, and China just activated shipyards no one knew existed." See, we had signed treaties, but we never forgot the most important rule. Never, ever leave yourself defenseless. We kept hidden facilities, secret stockpiles, and soldiers who were just waiting for the call. "What about the colonies?" Rodriguez asked. "Every non-essential human is being evacuated," Kim reported. "The outer worlds are gearing up, stockpiling everything they can." Rodriguez stared at the main screen, showing the Vorhak Empire's mighty fleet. On paper, they had over 3,000 advanced warships. Our official navy wouldn't stand a chance. "Give me the real numbers, Colonel," he said softly. Kim typed a code and a new file opened, one that hadn't been seen in 50 years. "Sir," she said, a hint of awe in her voice, "Project Deep Strike has 1,800 ships ready for immediate deployment. We can have another 3,000 built in 6 months, and we have enough firepower to turn every single Vorhak planet to glass." The room went dead silent. The truth was out. Humanity hadn't been peaceful. We'd been patient. We had spent 50 years playing nice, all while secretly preparing for a war that no one else in the galaxy even thought was possible anymore. Rodriguez smiled. The Vorhak had made a terrible mistake. They had shown humanity disrespect, and now humanity was going to build its memorial. A memorial made of fire and steel, a tribute to 847 children that the entire galaxy would remember forever. As for Commander Thrakosh, he was on his way home to face an inquiry. He had no idea he was being hunted by a ghost fleet, a fleet that would make sure his lesson was the last one his empire ever taught. The Vorhak war leader Dramor War went on record with a public apology for the accident. They offered to rebuild the hospital and throw some money at the grieving families, but their military stance hadn't changed one bit. They kept a few token patrols in the disputed systems, nothing that screamed they were expecting a fight. In fact, their latest intelligence report tagged humanity as a minimal military threat. Rodriguez almost cracked a smile. The Vorhak were disciplined soldiers, honorable warriors, sure, but that's all they were. They thought Earth would fire back with angry speeches and official protests. They figured any human retaliation would play by their rules, a straight-up fight between armies with codes of conduct and honor. They had absolutely no clue what humanity's real playbook looked like. "Activate Operation Memorial," Rodriguez commanded. Colonel Kim's fingers hovered over her console for a split second. "Sir," she said, "once we start this, there's no turning back. The aliens will see what we really are." Rodriguez's mind flashed to the images from New Geneva. 847 tiny coffins, 847 shattered families, 847 futures wiped out by what the Vorak brushed off as an accident. "Good," Rodriguez said, his voice cold steel. "It's about time they learned." All across human-controlled space, the true war machine began to stir. Hidden shipyards hummed to life, their construction systems firing up. Sealed weapons depots hissed open their blast doors. Retired officers started showing up for duty. Scientists working on peaceful research projects were quietly reassigned to military applications. But from the outside, none of this was visible. Vorak intelligence watched Earth's public channels and saw exactly what they'd been conditioned to see. A species lost in grief, trying to find a solution through diplomacy. Human news channels were filled with memorial services and calls for peace. Earth's official military posture stayed at normal readiness. The handful of human warships out in space just kept to their usual patrol routes. Aboard the Vorak flagship, Commander Thrax was in his quarters, drafting his formal report on the New Geneva incident. A board of inquiry would pick apart his actions and decide if he'd broken military protocol. He fully expected to be stripped of his command, maybe even cast out from the warrior class for good. It was a steep price for an accident, but Thrax was ready to pay it. He was in charge of the mission, so he was responsible for the horrific outcome. That was the Vorak way. Leaders owned their failures. His aide stepped into the cabin and gave a respectful bow. "Commander, we've received a message from the human ambassador." Thrax glanced up from his report. "What do they want now?" "Ambassador Chen is requesting a private meeting. She says Earth wants to discuss the memorial arrangements to make sure they don't disrespect any Vorak cultural traditions." Thrax frowned. The request actually sounded reasonable, thoughtful even. Most species would want to make sure their memorials didn't accidentally offend the very people involved in the tragedy. "Schedule the meeting," Thrax decided, "and let the ambassador know I'll answer any question she has about what happened. The families of the dead have a right to know exactly what went down." 3 days later, Ambassador Chen showed up at the Vorak embassy on the neutral planet of Kepler Station. She was alone, no guards, no aides. She was wearing a simple black dress, the traditional human attire for mourning. Thrax met her in a private conference room. Up close, the massive Vorak commander was even more intimidating, but Chen saw that his bone crests were dull, a sign of deep shame among his people. "Ambassador," Thrax began formally, "I need you to know that I accept full responsibility for what happened on New Geneva. If I could give my life in exchange for those children's, I would do it in a heartbeat." Chen just watched his face. She'd memorized the intel files on Vorak culture and psychology. Everything about Thrax's posture, his expression, it all screamed genuine remorse. He was a warrior who had accidentally shattered his own code of honor, and the guilt was eating him from the inside out. "I believe you," Chen said softly. "The technical analysis of your weapon systems confirms it was a malfunction, not deliberate targeting." Thrax's powerful forearms relaxed just a little. "Then you understand we are not monsters, that this was truly an accident." "I understand you never meant to kill children," Chen replied. "But Commander, you need to understand something about us. Intent doesn't matter when our children are dead." Something in her tone put Thrax's warrior instincts on high alert. Chen still looked small, fragile, but there was a new quality to her now. Something icy cold. "What exactly are you saying, Ambassador?" Chen reached into her bag and took out a small holographic projector. She switched it on, and the air above the table shimmered to life. The first image was of New Geneva's Children's Hospital before the attack. Thrax could see little human kids playing in the gardens outside, their parents watching over them. It looked so peaceful, so innocent. The second image was the same spot after the plasma strike. There was nothing left but a crater of scorched rock and twisted metal. Emergency crews were picking through the rubble, but Thrax could tell from the slump in their shoulders they weren't hoping to find anyone alive. 847 children, Chen said, her voice still quiet but sharp as glass. The youngest was 2 years old, the oldest was 16. They died instantly so they didn't suffer. I suppose that's a small mercy. Thrax stared at the images, the weight of his shame pressing down on him. Ambassador, we have offered full reparations. By galactic law, Chen cut him off, was written by species that fight civilized wars. Species that have learned to put limits on casualties and follow rules of engagement. Species that treat war like a game with winners and losers, not a fight for survival. The hologram flickered, now showing grainy historical footage from Earth. Thrax saw human cities burning, vast armies trampling over ruined landscapes, and weapons that turned entire continents into dead zones. This is how humans learn to fight, Chen went on, not with honor codes or limited goals. We learn that when someone threatens your family, your children, your future, you don't play to win. You play to make sure the threat can never, ever get up again. Thrax's claws slid out without him even realizing it. His training was screaming that he was in danger, but his mind couldn't figure out why. Chen was unarmed, alone, and physically no match for him. And yet something about her was triggering every survival instinct he had. "What are you saying?" Thrax asked again, his voice tight. Chen switched off the projector and put it back in her bag. When she looked up, her eyes were perfectly calm. "I'm saying you need to understand the kind of memorial we're building for those children," she said. "It's not going to be made of stone or metal. It's not something you can visit or touch." She stood, walked to the door, and then paused, looking back at him one last time. "Our memorial will be the absolute certainty that no one ever kills human children again. Ever. Because anyone who tries will find out what happens when you mistake our mercy for weakness." After Chen was gone, Thrax sat in the conference room for a very long time. He tried to process what she'd said, but it just didn't compute. Everything he knew about humans painted them as reasonable, diplomatic, civilized. They were supposed to value life over conquest. He eventually concluded that Chen was just speaking out of grief and rage. Humans were emotional, after all, and the loss of so many young ones would naturally make them say things they didn't mean. Thrax filed a standard report, noting the meeting went well and that the humans appeared committed to a peaceful resolution. It was the last report he ever sent. Meanwhile, halfway across the galaxy, humanity's real answer was taking shape. Deep within the asteroid belt of the Sol system, massive construction facilities that had been dark for 50 years roared back to life. Automated mining rigs began tearing into asteroids, extracting raw materials at a furious pace. Assembly lines once used for civilian ships were now churning out warships, but these ships were nothing like the ones in the official human fleet. These were monsters, designed according to Earth's true military doctrine, not the watered-down blueprints they showed the Galactic Council. They carried weapons most alien species couldn't even dream of, devices created back when humanity was clawing its way through the stars, when survival meant being the most dangerous thing in the void. Admiral Rodriguez reviewed the production reports, a grim look of satisfaction on his face. In 6 months, humanity would possess the largest and deadliest space navy in known galactic history. More importantly, it would be a force built for a kind of total war that the rest of the galaxy had long forgotten. "Status on our infiltration assets?" Rodriguez asked. Colonel Kim brought up a new screen. Special operations teams are in place in all major Vorak systems. They're using captured alien tech, so they're completely invisible. We have 200 combat teams and 50 technical specialists on the ground right now. Rodriguez nodded slowly. The infiltration teams were humanity's true masterstroke. The rest of the galaxy saw humans as a joke, a primitive species still messing around with gunpowder and chemical rockets. But they'd missed our greatest weapon, our ability to adapt, improvise, and turn their own tech against them. For decades, our special ops teams had been quietly studying captured alien gear. We couldn't build our own antimatter bombs, sure, but we got really good at stealing them, tweaking them, and using them in ways the original creators never dreamed of. Any sign from Vorak intelligence? Not a peep. Their security scans for standard galactic tech. They're completely blind to human infiltration methods. It was the same mistake every alien race made. They judged us by their standards. They counted our ships, cataloged our weapons, and measured our tech. What they never, ever considered was how we fight when our backs are against the wall. See, humans don't fight fair. We don't follow the rules unless someone makes us. And we definitely don't believe war should be some kind of civilized game. When you push us to the brink, we tap into the same brutal survival instinct that got us through 10,000 years on a planet where everything was trying to eat us. "What's the word from the Galactic Council?" Rodriguez asked. Kim smirked. "They're very impressed with our diplomatic maturity. A few species even praised our peaceful handling of the New Geneva incident. The Athatheran Collective even put out a statement applauding humanity for choosing compromise over conflict," she added. Rodriguez just stared at the tactical display, watching the icons of the Vorak fleet spread across the galaxy. 12 battle groups, protecting an empire that had stood for 2,000 years. In a few days, those fleets were about to get a lesson in what human compromise really meant. Timeline for Phase 1? All teams will be in position within 18 days. Once we go live, the Vorak Empire will have roughly 72 hours before its entire command structure is completely crippled. Rodriguez had been in enough wars to know this moment. The quiet right before the storm was always the most dangerous. Once Operation Memorial started, there was no calling it off. Earth was about to show its real teeth to the galaxy, and the fallout would echo for centuries. But every time a flicker of doubt crossed his mind, Rodriguez saw the images from New Geneva. 847 small bodies being pulled from the wreckage of a children's hospital. 847 families shattered forever. The Vorak wanted to teach humanity a lesson about consequences. Well, class was about to be in session. "Execute Phase 1, Rodriguez ordered. All across the galaxy, hidden human teams received their go codes. Ghost ships lurking in deep space for weeks powered up their engines and moved towards their targets. Weapon systems that officially didn't exist were armed and brought online. The memorial for the children of New Geneva was about to begin. And when it was over, no one in the galaxy would ever mistake our grief for weakness again. The first strike hit without a single word of warning. The planet Coraval was the sacred heart of the Vorak Empire, its spiritual center for over 1,500 years. Ancient temples blanketed its surface, each a library of artifacts telling the story of their civilization. It's where young warriors learned their history and where elders contemplated honor. It was a place of total peace, protected by treaty and tradition. It had zero military value. High Priest Yorak was in the middle of morning prayers when the sky caught fire. He glanced up through the temple's massive crystal dome and saw burning streaks of light raining down from orbit. This wasn't the gentle glow of landing craft. It was the harsh, angry glare of objects moving at impossible speeds. The first impacts rocked the northern continent. Yorak felt the floor tremble beneath him as huge explosions bloomed hundreds of miles away. The crystal dome overhead fractured, casting splintered rainbows across the temple. "What is happening?" one of the young priests whispered in terror. Yorak rushed to the temple's comm system, trying to raise the orbital defense stations. Nothing but static. He tried to contact the planetary government. More static. Every channel was either dead or flooded with garbled noise. More burning streaks fell from the sky, this time much closer. And that's when Yorak realized, with a wave of cold horror, that someone was systematically vaporizing every single place of importance on Koraval. The ancient library holding all their military history. The monument gardens where the names of their greatest heroes were carved in stone. The meditation centers where the core philosophies of honorable combat were taught. It was all being erased. The final strike was aimed directly at the great temple itself, the most sacred place in the entire Vorak Empire. Yorak had just enough time to see a single object screaming towards them, moving faster than anything he could comprehend. The antimatter warhead turned the entire temple complex into a flash of light so bright it could be seen from space. When the light died down, all that was left was a smoking crater of molten rock 3 miles wide. Similar attacks were happening all across Vorak territory, not on military bases or industrial worlds, but on every single planet that held any cultural or spiritual meaning for the Empire. In just 6 hours, 2,000 years of Vorak history and identity were reduced to radioactive glass. War leader Drachor got the first reports at his command center on the Vorak homeworld. He stared at the damage reports in stunned disbelief. 18 sacred worlds, his intelligence officer reported, his voice trembling. Total annihilation of all cultural sites. No military targets were hit. They've made no demands. No one has even claimed responsibility. Drachor's claws dug deep into the arm of his command chair. In all his centuries of warfare, he'd never seen anything like it. Military attacks were supposed to have a point: take territory, crush an enemy fleet, force a surrender. This was something else entirely. "What about our fleets?" he growled. "Untouched, sir. The attackers specifically avoided all of our military assets. They only went after—" The officer trailed off. "They only went after the places that define who we are." Just then, the comm system chirped with an incoming message. Drachor expected to see a human general demanding his surrender, or maybe a mediator from the Galactic Council begging for peace. Instead, a simple line of text appeared on the screen, written in perfect Vorak script. "You killed 847 of our children. We have destroyed 847 of your most sacred sites. This is just the beginning." The message vanished. Drachor stared at the blank screen for what felt like an eternity. Then he started barking orders. "Get me every fleet commander now! Full emergency mobilization! Contact the Galactic Council! Demand they order the humans to stand down immediately!" But even as he shouted, Drachor knew it was useless. His fleets were built to fight other ships in open space, not to guard cultural landmarks scattered across a dozen worlds. And the Galactic Council had no real power over a species that decided to simply ignore them. For the first time in his very long life, the most powerful warrior in the Vorak Empire had no idea what to do. The attack on their sacred worlds was just the opening act. For weeks, human infiltration teams had been moving into position all across Vorak space, using stolen tech to stay invisible. And they carried weapons the galaxy had never seen, hybrid monstrosities that Earth's engineers had cooked up by mixing human ingenuity with alien hardware. Captain Maria Santos was leading one of those teams on the military planet of Garce. She was 32 years old, a hardened veteran of the colonial wars who had signed up for the most dangerous mission of her life. Her squad was made up of 12 special ops soldiers, every one of them an expert at operating deep behind enemy lines. "Target is the Vorak Naval Academy," Santos whispered into her comms as her team slipped through the alien city like ghosts in the night. "Intel says this is where they've trained their officers for the last 800 years. The academy was a sprawling fortress of red stone buildings, built in their traditional, imposing style. Thousands of young recruits arrived here every year to learn fleet tactics, coordination, and the rigid codes of honor that the Vorak prided themselves on. Santos and her team made their way towards the main building through a network of underground service tunnels. The Vorak had never encountered anything like human infiltration tactics before, so their security was all geared towards detecting known alien tech. They were completely blind to the cobbled-together gear our engineers had created from stolen parts. "Charges are set," Sergeant Chen's voice crackled over the radio. "Neutron devices are armed and ready." Neutron weapons were one of humanity's most horrifying inventions. Unlike antimatter bombs that flattened everything, neutron devices were designed to kill living beings while leaving buildings and machines perfectly untouched. When the sun came up, the academy would look exactly as it did before, but everyone and everything inside would be silent and still. "All teams are set," Santos reported quietly into her comm. Across the planet, 11 other squads just like hers had slipped into the heart of the enemy's war machine. They were inside military academies, officer training centers, and strategic command hubs, every single place that taught the young Vorak how to wage war. The order came from orbit, a single word: execute. Santos squeezed the trigger. All over the planet, neutron devices hummed to life. There was no fireball, no shattering blast. The buildings stood untouched. The lights stayed on. The computer terminals continued to glow. But inside, every living thing was gone. Santos and her team slipped back out through the tunnels, leaving a perfect, silent tomb behind them. By morning, they'd be back on their stealth ship, already rocketing toward the next target. Eventually, the Vorak would find the bodies. They'd discover thousands of their most promising young officers, their most decorated instructors, and their sharpest military minds, all dead without a single mark on them. The very halls where they had forged warriors for centuries would be pristine but hauntingly empty. It would take the Vorak Empire decades to recover their military leadership, and by then, it wouldn't matter. This same silent, devastating strike was happening all across Vorak space. Every academy, every training ground, every institution that raised the next generation of their soldiers was being systematically erased. The humans weren't trying to win a battle. They were trying to make it impossible for the Vorak to ever fight again. From his command bunker deep inside Cheyenne Mountain, Admiral Rodriguez watched the status reports flood his screens. One by one, teams from across the galaxy confirmed their success. "Phase 2 complete," Colonel Kim reported, her voice crisp. "All primary objectives have been eliminated. We estimate Vorak military training capacity is down by 97%. Rodriguez stared at the tactical maps. In less than 48 hours, humanity had effectively neutered the Vorak Empire's ability to sustain a long-term war. But this was only the beginning of Operation Memorial. "What's the status on Phase 3? He asked. "All assets are in position," Kim replied. "We're ready to begin the systematic elimination of Vorak population centers." Rodriguez took a deep breath. Phase 3 was the point of no return. Until now, they had meticulously targeted military and cultural sites, going to great lengths to avoid civilian deaths. This would change everything. But then he remembered the children of New Geneva, and his heart turned to stone. "Begin Phase 3, Rodriguez commanded. All across the galaxy, massive human battle fleets, hidden for 50 years in deep space, began to move. These weren't the small patrol ships the galaxy knew about. These were planet killers. The Vorak homeworld of Korath was the first to see them coming. Long-range sensors screamed alerts, picking up 60 ships dropping out of hyperspace at the system's edge. War leader Dramor looked at the readings, baffled. Every piece of intelligence he'd ever seen claimed the humans had fewer than 30 major warships, yet here were twice that many, and their energy signatures were unlike anything in his empire's arsenal. "Open a channel to the human fleet," Dramor ordered. The main view screen flickered to life, showing the bridge of the human flagship. A woman in a simple military uniform stared back at him, her expression unreadable. Her name tag read, Admiral Chen. "I am War Leader Dramor of the Vorak Empire," he announced, using the formal language of military commanders. "You have trespassed in Vorak space and committed acts of war against my people. I demand an explanation." Admiral Chen observed him for a long moment. "War Leader, my name is Admiral Lisa Chen. I'm here to deliver a message from the government of Earth." "Then deliver it," he snapped. "The message is very simple," Chen replied, her voice chillingly calm. "You killed our children. Now, we are going to kill everything you love. Your sacred worlds are gone. Your military academies are empty. Your cultural history has been erased. And now, we are going to begin on your civilians." Dramor felt his blood run cold. You can't attack defenseless populations. That violates every law of civilized warfare." Admiral Chen's expression didn't so much as flicker. "War Leader, you seem to believe this is a civilized war. It is not. This is what humans call total war. It means we do not stop until our enemy is no longer a functioning civilization." The communication channel went dead. Dramor stared at the blank screen, his mind struggling to grasp what he had just heard. In all his studies, he had never even heard of such a concept. Civilized races fought for planets, for resources, for political power. They didn't fight to utterly annihilate their enemies, but the humans, apparently, did. "Contact the Galactic Council now!" Dramor roared. "Tell them the humans are planning a genocide against the Vorak people. Demand they intervene immediately." His communications officer worked frantically for several minutes before turning back, his face pale. "War Leader, I can't get through. All frequencies to the council are being jammed." In that moment, Dramor knew. The humans had planned for this too. They had completely isolated the Vorak Empire from any hope of rescue before beginning their final, brutal assault. The human fleet began its advance toward Korath cities. Dramor threw his own fleets against them, a desperate attempt to buy time, only to discover another terrible surprise. The human ships were faster, more agile, and better armed than anything the Vorak possessed. They seemed to operate on military principles the Vorak couldn't even comprehend, designed for a kind of brutal, efficient warfare the galaxy had long forgotten. When the fleets finally clashed high above Korath, it wasn't a fight. It was a slaughter. The human ships tore through the Vorak formations like predators, their weapons cutting through advanced alien defenses as if they were made of paper. In less than 2 hours, the entire Vorak home fleet was nothing but a cloud of drifting wreckage. Admiral Chen opened a channel one last time. "War Leader, you have a choice. Evacuate your civilians and surrender all claims to the disputed systems, or you can stay and watch us turn your homeworld into a cinder." Dramor looked at the display showing the shattered remains of his fleet, then at the human warships taking up orbital positions above his planet's largest cities. "You have won," he whispered, the words tasting like ash. "The Vorak Empire offers its unconditional surrender. Please, spare our people." The Vorak Empire, Admiral Chen replied coolly, no longer exists. What happens to your people now depends on whether they understand that reality. The channel closed, leaving Dramor to stare at the new, terrifying future of his world. In under 3 days, the great Vorak Empire, a power that had dominated its corner of the galaxy for 2 millennia, had been utterly broken as a political and military force. Their holy worlds were irradiated craters. Their military academies were silent tombs. Their mighty battle fleets were just space junk. And the humans had only just begun. Reports were blazing across the galaxy as news of the Vorak's fall spread. Every species with ties to Earth was getting the exact same broadcast. This is what happens when you kill human children. Learn from it. The galaxy was finally starting to understand its fundamental catastrophic mistake. Earth wasn't a peaceful species slowly learning how to be civilized. Earth was a predator species that had simply been pretending to be civilized. And the act was now over. The emergency session of the Galactic Council was pure chaos. Representatives from 200 species packed the chamber, their voices a storm of fear and confusion in dozens of different languages. The giant crystal dome overhead, usually a source of serene starlight, now felt like it was trapping them all. Speaker Valdris, an ancient being of pure energy, pulsed with distress at the chamber's center. In his 3,000 years of existence, he had never seen anything like the systematic annihilation of the Vorak Empire. Great civilizations were supposed to fade over centuries, even millennia. They weren't supposed to be wiped off the map in less than a week. "Order!" Valdris boomed, his voice echoing through the chaos. "This council will conduct itself with decorum." But decorum was impossible as the updates kept pouring in. The Vorak homeworld was now under human occupation. An armada of refugee ships, carrying the survivors from 18 different sacred worlds, was now scattered and helpless in neutral space. The proud warrior race that had stood for 2,000 years had been reduced to homeless beggars in less than 72 hours. Elder Kais of the Krex was the first to speak, his enormous shell clicking with sheer terror. How could this be? Our intelligence was airtight. We knew the humans possessed a minimal military force. Their entire official fleet numbered only 28 vessels. In the human delegations area, Ambassador Chen looked smaller and more delicate than ever. Behind her, the other human representatives observed the chaos with a placid calm that was far more unsettling than any outburst of rage. "The issue," rumbled Ambassador Thexar of the Zepyrian hegemony, "isn't how they managed it. The question is why. This level of annihilation goes far beyond any sane response to the new Geneva incident." Murmurs of agreement echoed from several other species. The unintentional loss of civilian life in military actions was a tragedy, yes, but it was a known risk in galactic conflict. Reparations were always paid, apologies were formally issued, and life moved on. What the humans did, this was something else entirely. "Perhaps," suggested diplomat Ythara of the Crystalline Union, her voice soft, "we should simply ask the humans to explain themselves." Every eye in the chamber swiveled to Ambassador Chen. She rose from her seat and walked to the speaker's platform, the sound of her footsteps echoing in the sudden heavy silence. When she stood at the chamber's center, she looked up, meeting the gaze of the hundreds of alien faces staring down at her. "You want to know why we dismantled the Vorak Empire?" Chen asked, her voice ringing with perfect clarity. "The reason is very simple. They killed our children." "But it was an accident," protested Councillor Vexthi from the Aquatic Coalition. "Commander Thrakaj himself confessed to the targeting error. Reparations were offered." Chen gave a slow, deliberate nod. "Yes, it was an accident. And yes, you offered money. Under galactic law, The case should have been closed. She paused, letting the weight of her words fill the room. But you see, your galactic law was written by species who have never known the threat of extinction. Species that have never had to truly fight for the right to simply exist. Species who can afford to see war as a tidy game with rules and boundaries. The chamber was utterly still as she continued. Humans learned to fight on a planet where every living thing was actively trying to kill us. We never had the luxury of civilized warfare. We didn't have codes of honor or limited objectives. When a threat to our survival appeared, we had only two options: obliterate it completely or be obliterated ourselves. Elder Kais leaned his massive form forward. But surely you grasp the distinction between an individual fighting for survival and what you have unleashed upon the Vorak. Chen locked eyes with the colossal Krex elder. Do you have children, Elder Kais? The question seemed to throw him off balance. Yes. I have many offspring. And if someone killed those offspring, even accidentally, what would you do? I would seek justice through the established channels. I would file formal complaints. I would demand reparations according to... You would follow procedure, Chen cut in, her voice sharp. Because your species has always known safety. Your homeworld is a fortress. Your children are raised without fear. You can afford to put your faith in systems and laws because those systems have never once failed you. She turned, her gaze sweeping across the entire assembly. Humans cannot afford that luxury. Our history is a story written in the blood of children who died because their parents trusted that someone else would keep them safe. We learned over 10,000 years of war, genocide, and extinction events that when someone kills your young, you don't open negotiations. You make certain they can never, ever do it again. The silence in the chamber was absolute. The Vorak Empire is gone, Chen went on, because we needed to send a message to the entire galaxy, and this is the message. Human children are not acceptable casualties. They are not collateral damage. They are not a line item in the cost of doing business. Anyone who harms them, for any reason, will face a response that makes what we did to the Vorak look like an act of mercy. Counselor Vexthi's aquatic suit bubbled in agitation. You talk about a proportional response. 800 children died on New Geneva. How many Vorak have you killed in this retaliation? None, Chen answered calmly. The chamber exploded into a chorus of confused noises. Translators whirred and chirped, requesting clarification, certain of a mistake. None, Chen repeated, her voice cutting through the din. We used precision strikes to destroy their sacred sites, carefully avoiding all civilian centers. We neutralized their military academies with weapons designed to harm only the personnel within. We defeated their fleets in open combat, but we have not intentionally targeted a single Vorak civilian. Elder Kais's shell clicked in utter bewilderment. Then what was the point of all this destruction? A small smile touched Chen's lips, and that simple expression was more terrifying than any war cry. We didn't kill the Vorak people, Elder Kais. We killed their civilization, their culture, their very ability to see themselves as a proud warrior race. We took away everything that defined them, and we left them alive to contemplate what they lost. She gestured to the main view screen, which now showed fleets of Vorak refugee ships. Look at them, she said. Once they were proud conquerors. Now they are beggars, pleading for aid from species they once deemed inferior. Their children will be raised in exile, learning alien tongues and foreign customs. In 3 generations, no one will even remember what it meant to be Vorak. The true horror of their actions began to settle over the chamber. Physical genocide was a known evil, but this was something else. The humans had committed cultural genocide, forcing their victims to live through the slow, agonizing death of their entire identity. "This is monstrous," diplomat Ithara whispered. Chen turned to her. "Yes, it is. We are fully aware of how monstrous it is. That's precisely why it's so effective." Speaker Valdris pulsed with a distressed light. "Ambassador Chen, you must understand that such an act cannot be allowed in civilized space. The Council will have to take measures to prevent—" "To prevent what?" Chen interrupted. "To prevent humans from defending themselves when we're attacked? To stop us from responding when our children are slaughtered?" She walked slowly toward the speaker's podium. "Speaker Valdris, allow me to be perfectly clear. What we did to the Vorak wasn't a violation of galactic law. It was an application of human law. And human law is very simple. You kill our children, we kill your future." "But the proportionality," another delegate stammered. "Is perfect," Chen finished for him. "The Vorak stole the futures from 847 human children. So in return, we took the future from their entire civilization. They will never threaten another child again, because they will never be in a position to threaten anyone, ever." The chamber was silent as the chilling logic settled in. Every representative present was suddenly, frantically calculating the number of children on their home worlds and what it might mean if human children in their territory ever came to harm. "What is it you want from us?" Elder Kaiz asked, his voice now quiet and subdued. Chen returned to the platform and activated a holographic display. A formal document, written in dozens of languages, materialized in the air. "We want the Vorak Accords," she announced. "A new treaty that will define all future interactions between civilized species and humanity." The document flashed onto screens around the chamber. As the delegates began to read, their expressions shifted from confusion to alarm. The first article declared absolute immunity for all human civilian populations. Any attack would trigger an immediate and total declaration of war. The second article gave humanity complete veto power over any and all Galactic Council military operations. The third created a system of species-wide consequences for any harm that came to a human child. But it was the fourth article that made them truly recoil in horror. "Mutual defense obligations," Speaker Valdris read aloud, his voice trembling slightly. "Any species under human protection shall receive the full and unconditional support of its military against any and all aggression." Chen nodded. "We're giving you a choice. You can sign the accords and fall under the protection of Earth's military. Your children will be safe, because we will consider them our children too. Anyone who threatens them will meet the same end as the Vorak." "And if we refuse?" Ambassador Thexar asked, his voice tight. Chen's expression didn't change. "Then you are not under our protection, and what happens to your children is your own problem." The threat was elegantly phrased but brutally clear. Any species that didn't sign would be on their own, knowing that humanity would now see them not as potential allies, but as potential threats. "This is extortion," Councillor Vexti protested. "No," Chen replied. "This is evolution. The galaxy is changing. You can either change with it, or you can end up just like the Vorak." A cacophony of voices erupted as delegates began to argue. Some demanded an outright rejection of the human demands. Others pleaded for negotiation. A small few quietly whispered that signing the treaty might be the only logical path forward. Chen waited patiently, letting the chaos run its course. When the noise finally subsided, she spoke one last time. "You have 7 standard days to make your decision. After that, this offer is off the table." "And what happens in 7 days if we say no?" Elder Kaiz asked. Chen looked slowly around the chamber, her gaze lingering on the representatives of dozens of powerful species. "In 7 days, if you refuse, we will formally withdraw from this Galactic Council. We will seal our borders to all alien contact, and we will begin preparing for the day when one of your species inevitably makes the same mistake the Vorak did." The ensuing silence was so profound it was almost a physical force. "You would isolate yourselves from the whole of galactic civilization?" Speaker Valdris asked, his tone one of pure disbelief. "If we must," Chen said. "Humans survived for 10,000 years before we knew any of you existed. We can survive for 10,000 more if that's what it takes. The only question left is whether you want to be our partners in building a safer galaxy, or if you want to be potential threats that we need to start planning against." As the full weight of her words landed, the delegates finally understood the true nature of the choice they faced. They were given just 7 days. 7 days to decide if their entire way of life was worth throwing away. That's the ultimatum my delegation gave 200 of the galaxy's most powerful civilizations. Some called it arrogance, but we called it justice. For too long, humanity had been the underdog, the newcomers begging for a seat at the table. Then the Vorak Empire burned our colonies, and the Council did nothing. Now we were back, not to ask for a seat, but to take the whole table. What would you do if you finally had the power to make sure your people were never hurt again? Stick around for the next 60 seconds to see how a species of upstarts rewrote the laws of the galaxy. The galaxy they had known for thousands of years was officially over. A new one was about to be born, and its future depended on how many of them were smart enough to see it. Outside the chamber, Ambassador Chen let a small, private smile cross her lips. The hard part was done. Now, they just had to wait. Behind her, the greatest assembly of alien life in history was about to surrender without even realizing it. The vote happened exactly 7 days later. When Ambassador Chen entered the Galactic Council chamber, she was met with something she'd never experienced before. Absolute, unnerving silence. No whispers between delegates, no rustling papers, not even the faint hum of translation devices. 200 of the most influential species in the known universe sat perfectly still, waiting to find out what their future held. Speaker Valdris, an ancient being of pure energy, floated in the center of the room. His light seemed dimmer today, more subdued than Chen had ever seen it. He had watched empires rise and fall, but the weight of this moment seemed to have aged even him. "The council will now come to order," Valdris announced, his voice echoing in the stillness. "We are gathered today to vote on the Vorak Accords, as proposed by the human delegation." Chen found her seat, watching as holographic displays flickered to life all around her. The terms of the accords appeared in every language, but the message was brutally simple in all of them. For the last 7 days, governments across the galaxy had been in a state of panic. Parliaments held emergency sessions, ancient oracles were consulted, a few even tried to cobble together a last-minute military alliance to stand against the humans. But they all came to the same terrifying conclusion that Elder Kais had whispered in a private meeting just yesterday. "We either accept the humans' terms, or we end up like the Vorak. There is no other choice." "Before we vote," Speaker Valdris went on, "several species have requested to address the council." Ambassador Thextar of the Zephyrian hegemony was the first to rise. His people had been traveling the stars for over 5,000 years, back when humans were just figuring out agriculture. His voice was heavy with the weight of that history. "Fellow delegates," he began, "in my long life, I have witnessed 7 major galactic wars. I have seen empires turn to dust and new powers rise from their ashes. But I have never, ever seen anything like what the humans did last week." He paused, letting his words sink in. The Vorak Empire wasn't some backwater annoyance. They commanded over 400 star systems. Their military had never lost a war. Their civilization stood for 2 millennia, Thextar declared. and the humans wiped it from existence in less than 72 hours. A ripple of fear spread through the room. They all knew the facts, but hearing them laid out so plainly was a different kind of horror. Some of you may be thinking we can fight, Thextar continued. My government's top analysts ran the simulations. A hologram appeared above him. In a war between humanity and every other species here combined, humanity achieves total victory in less than 6 months. Not because they have more ships or bigger guns, but because they remember something we've forgotten about true warfare. The image shifted, showing a star going nova. It wasn't a natural event. They don't fight to win territory. They fight to permanently erase a threat. They don't have rules of engagement. They target a species' culture, their homeworld, their very will to exist. They don't stop until there is nothing left. Thextar shut off the hologram and looked straight at Ambassador Chen. The Zetherian hegemony will vote to accept the Vorak Accords, not because we agree with their methods, but because we are smart enough to know when we are completely and utterly outmatched. He sat down, and a murmur of grim agreement followed. Next was Elder Kai's, his huge crab-like shell gleaming under the lights. I'm old enough to remember a darker time, he rumbled, his voice like rocks grinding together. A time when wars between species were constant, planets were shattered, entire peoples were put in chains. It took us millennia to build the peaceful society we have today. He pointed a large claw toward the human delegation. The humans have reminded us that civilization isn't a given. It's a fragile thing that must be defended. And sometimes, defense requires the promise of total annihilation. Kais clicked his shell thoughtfully. My people spent 7 days debating this. We talked about philosophy, politics, and morality. But we kept coming back to one simple, undeniable truth. Under human protection, Kais's voice boomed with sudden strength, our children will be safer than they have ever been in galactic history. The Krex Coalition votes to accept the Vorak Accords. We welcome Earth as the galaxy's new protector because we know that true peace requires someone willing to be absolutely ruthless to those who would threaten it. One by one, others followed. The Crystalline Union accepted, desperate for stability. The Aquatic Coalition accepted, admitting their pacifism only worked if someone else did the fighting. The Insectoid Collective accepted, because the survival of the hive was all that mattered. With each vote, the outcome became clearer. The galaxy had made its choice. Some spoke with reluctance, others with praise for human strength. A few openly admitted they were just plain scared. But in the end, they all voted the same way. Finally, Speaker Valdris announced the official tally. The motion to adopt the Vorak Accords passes, 197 in favor, 0 opposed, and 3 abstentions. The chamber was so quiet you could hear a pin drop. With a single vote, 200 galactic powers had just agreed to place themselves under human military command. The age of cooperation was over. The age of human dominance had just begun. Ambassador Chen stood and walked to the speaker's platform one last time. Thank you for your wisdom, she said, her voice calm and clear. Earth accepts this responsibility. A star map lit up behind her, showing human-controlled space. Effective immediately, every species that signed these accords is now under the official protection of Earth. An attack on any of you, your worlds, your ships, your people, will be treated as a direct attack on humanity. Our response will be swift, and it will be final. The map shifted, showing fleets already on the move. Our forces are already creating defensive perimeters around your colonies. Our intelligence agencies are already hunting for the next threat to galactic peace. Our diplomats are ready to solve disputes before they turn violent, Chen continued, letting her gaze sweep across the room. But remember, this is a two-way street. You will not start wars that we have to finish. You will not commit atrocities that we have to answer for. And you will never, under any circumstances, harm a human citizen." The threat was unspoken, but crystal clear. Protection came with a leash. "What about the species that didn't sign?" a delegate called out from the back. Chen looked toward the 3 delegations that had abstained, the nomadic wanderers, the isolated remnant, and the fiercely independent solitaries. "They have always valued their freedom above all else, and they remain free to choose their own path," Chen replied calmly. "But they will do so without our protection. When a threat comes that they cannot handle alone, they should not call on Earth for help." The line had been drawn. You were either with humanity or you were on your own. Speaker Valdris floated closer to her. "Ambassador," he asked, his energy form flickering with uncertainty, "what happens now?" Chen gave him a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "It's very simple, Speaker. Earth will make sure that no one under our watch ever has to fear for their children again. Peace is finally here. But peace has a price. In return for our protection," she began, her voice steady, "we expect you to help maintain a galaxy where that protection is no longer needed." She nodded towards a new, somber addition to the chamber, a wall of polished black stone. 847 names. That's how many children we lost on New Geneva. This memorial will stay here to remind every one of you what's at stake. Every delegate who walks through these doors will see those names and remember what happens when you decide human children are an acceptable price to pay. Chen calmly stacked her papers. "The era of civilized warfare is finished," she announced. "The age of absolute protection has just begun. Your children are safe now, because we will utterly destroy anyone who threatens them. Your civilizations will last, because we will eliminate any force that tries to tear them down." She started for the exit, then paused, turning back to face the stunned assembly. "This is the memorial we built for the children of New Geneva. Not a statue, not some grand monument, but a guarantee, a promise that no child anywhere in this galaxy will ever have to die the way they did." As Chen walked out, the delegates sat frozen in their seats. They had just seen galactic politics get rewritten in a single speech. The delicate balance of power that had held for 1,000 years was gone, replaced by human dominance, backed by a chilling willingness to wipe entire cultures from existence. But as the initial shock faded, a surprising emotion started to surface in the chamber. It was relief. For the first time in forever, they knew, with absolute certainty, that their children were safe. Not because of some treaty or a diplomatic handshake, but because a species had finally emerged that was willing to burn down entire civilizations just to protect the innocent. The humans had kept their word. They had built a true memorial for New Geneva's children. That memorial was the new galactic order itself, a system where hurting a child would bring consequences so terrifying no one would ever dare risk it. In the halls outside, representatives from dozens of worlds were already adapting. They needed to open direct lines of communication with Earth's military. They needed to sync their defense grids with human fleets. They had to rewrite their foreign policies to account for humanity's watchful eye. But most of all, they had to make sure their own people understood the new rules of the galaxy. And the rules were brutally simple. Human children were untouchable. Any species under human protection was untouchable, and anyone who threatened either would find out what a real war looked like. Within a single year, the galaxy was transformed. Pirate crews that had plagued the space lanes for centuries simply disappeared, hunted down and eliminated by human forces who never offered surrender. Border conflicts that had simmered for decades were suddenly resolved, with human warships acting as the final word in mediation. Civilian casualties in conflicts dropped to almost zero because everyone understood the price for harming non-combatants. The scattered Vorak refugees served as a living, breathing example of what happened when you broke the new rule. Their children were growing up speaking alien languages, adopting alien customs, their own culture now nothing more than a history lesson in a database. And at the heart of the Galactic Council chamber, the memorial wall stood as a permanent warning. 847 names carved in stone, marking the day humanity finally showed the galaxy its true face. The children of New Geneva had died in what was, officially, a tragic accident, but their deaths had bought something no law or treaty ever could: absolute, unconditional safety for every other child in the galaxy. The other species had finally learned that humans don't build monuments to honor their dead. They build certainties.